Your sweet, sweet lips, your perfect nose, your rosy cheeks, your 10 little toes, your precious little pee-pee, your wondrous size, your tender bottom, your pink chubby thighs.
We've waited so long for you to come. I'm your dad,
and I am your mom,
and we can see it's perfectly true. You're perfectly, perfectly you.
Welcome to BEPE Presents. Birth and Early Parenting Educators is an alliance of professionals interested in and focused on the first period of human development from conception to birth and breastfeeding. This is a dramatically important aspect of human development, perhaps the most important time for human beings in their development. And this is because we've learned recently that the baby in the womb is extraordinarily sensitive and vulnerable and open and communicative, as we were never able to know before. And we want to get the message of these new discoveries out to parents so they can benefit from them as soon as possible. This program you're about to see is one in a series of programs that we've prepared for you, which we hope will be very fascinating and illuminates this period of human development.
You're perfectly, perfectly you.
My name is Amber Hartnell, and I am a voice for the potential that we have in birth and life to open and allow the creative force to dance its way through us.
And I am Elena Vladimirova, a Russian woman with Italian last name, living in California now.
Elena, what is it that you are focusing on right now to make a difference and enhance the planet?
I am working for the last 27 years on promoting the information for women about conscious procreation.
Okay, what does that mean, conscious procreation?
Conscious procreation means that we take back the art of people making back into our hands. We as a species have a pretty poor track record recently with the way we bring in new people into this world. Around the world, in third world countries especially, the C-section rates are up to 80, 90, 95% in South Africa and Brazil. Oh. It's staggering, it's sad, because it has vast implications on the quality of our life. It's not just about birth. Birth was never just about birth, because the way we're born defines the way we live, really. But that includes not only the birth itself, also the way we were gestated throughout 9 months of pregnancy, also the way we were conceived. It turns out that everything that we experience from the moment that our soul took that commitment and willingness of embodying in this three-dimensional reality, which is sometimes it's a few months before the pregnancy, before the conception. Everything that happens with parents affects the way this person will live, experience owning the body. So that's how our civilization right now, in the state that it is now, is reflecting our birthing practices. We started losing our ability to procreate peacefully, gracefully, in dignity. the way any cat knows how to procreate. We lost at some point, and I think it's something with acquiring developed cortex, something to do with ability to hold on to stress, something to say about our ability to be in fear, experience the actual specific cumulative amount of stress hormone in our bloodstream. Maybe when violence, aggression was introduced into the species. See, normally species don't kill their own. They have at least some kind of safety within their own environment. But we, the people, started killing each other. What we do know is that when the stress comes in, cervix locks. And during the labor, it's very hard to deal with locked cervix. The normal way all animals do it, they go into deep silence, deep privacy, into very, very, very physiological state of being. And the reptilian brain does the reptilian brain, part of our brain, does the opening. And when the stress hormone hits the bloodstream, the cervix locks. It's the mechanism that nature designed to assure the survival of the species. Imagine if you are a deer and you're giving birth in the bushes, and there comes in a wolf or any other kind of predator, a lion. So you have to close the door and be able to run for your life and not drop the baby.
So how does that transfer to what's going on with women right now?
Well, right now, imagine a laboring woman, all of a sudden, when she goes into labor, everything starts swirling and everybody starts crazy running around her and calling the doctor and getting the car and packing her bags and rush her to the hospital. How can somebody not release some stress hormone? So usually it happens so that women get in the hospital and like, false alarm, let's go back home, because everything stopped, right? Well, sometimes everything doesn't stop, but still the cervix is closed, so very, very difficult in all that commotion to maintain the degree of surrender and staying with the process, with the body. The body is doing the job just beautifully. Only about 5% of women really need medical intervention and help. But most of women are absolutely capable of staying with it and doing it themselves without having to be numbed, drugged, split, cut open, have the whole team in surgery masks, expensive equipment, blazing lights, all the surgery emergency environment. Giving birth is not an emergency. The same way going to the bathroom is not an emergency. Digesting food is not an emergency. Giving birth is done from the same place from which our cells keep pumping the blood. Even if a woman is in a coma, she continues her gestation. Women can even conceive in a coma and give birth in a coma.
Well, how would that tie to, you talked about the gestational process and the stress, because that's my other question as well. Some women might be listening to this and thinking, we're the superwoman now, taking care of our kids, working, some women working full-time, managing a household. Some might be listening to that and thinking, especially those who are thinking of having more children, it might even cause more stress to think about how do I let go of that stress before conceiving another child, because it definitely puts a lot more burden or responsibility for the life that you're creating. Does that make sense?
Yes, and it is a big responsibility. If a woman does not understand that it's a big responsibility to bring in a new child, well, maybe she needs to wait a little bit. Or do something, research, find out. It's a biggest job a woman will ever run into, you know, giving birth and raising a child. Really, the sooner she will get that, the better. And there is a lot that can be done during. Actually, it's better to do it before conception. That's where the concept of conscious conception kicks in. That preparing for conscious people making is a big part of the whole point of view. How much our formative period is affecting what kind of quality of that life will be. So, how to navigate the energy and stay relaxed in our stressful world, that's basically what the preparation is all about.
Now, did you do this work with Amber, who's sitting next to you, and actually tell me about the story and how the two of you connected with each other?
Actually, I think we should backtrack.
Yeah.
Because the way that we met, I was actually 3 months pregnant when we met briefly in a parking lot, but actually connected when I was 3 months pregnant. And she came to Hawaii to assist a dear friend of mine's birth, who had asked me to be a part of her birth. So I was actually 3 months pregnant in the tub the whole time with my sister giving birth, while Elena was there supporting, and we connected then and really recognized each other as a deep soul kinship, but really her really feeling like a mother role to me and a daughter role. And I lost my mother when I was young, and she would be her age, and she lost a child when she was young that would be my age, so it just fit naturally. So we really connected and recognized each other instantly, and I was there for the birth and actually participated in her workshop at that time that she gives to prepare couples and individuals to clear their limbic imprint, their birth imprint, and be prepared to birth in an easeful way and live their life free from the conditions that we set up from the moments that we first enter into this plane here in these bodies. So that was the beginning, and so we remained deeply in contact through my pregnancy, and her work was always just naturally aligned with mine. And I received, in the beginning of my pregnancy, I received the guidance that it was really meant to not fill my head with information about birth, that I wasn't to read books. I was to remain open and available for the innate wisdom that is available to all of us to enter through and inform my process every step of the way, whether it was what I needed to do to nurture myself, what I needed to eat. Like, it was very specific always, as long as I surrendered my mental static and listened to the still small voice that was always there, as long as I would make myself available to it. And so that applied for the birth. So really, you were asking, what it was that, I was doing, and it was really a way, there's a fundamental way that I've learned to relate with life and reality that's been learned over time, but very natural. And that is really learning how to quiet that static, to quiet the voices and the outside expectations that would dictate how I would respond to anything, and to learn to trust my knowing, to trust the movements of my body, to trust my instincts, my intuitions, even beyond what I logically understood. So over years of time of going through this process of overcoming my self-doubt, I've learned to trust that and move with that infallibly. So in birth, and in pregnancy, I really approached it that I can allow this force to move through me in the most natural way, and I can surrender into it, and I can trust it, and I can allow myself to be carried by it. And, I specifically had articulated in the movie that, in birth, I experienced it all as just sensation. So, we do have the ability to command how we experience sensation. We do actually have a choice. People think that they don't have a choice, that pain is pain and pleasure is pleasure, but actually it's really how you choose to translate it that determines what it is. And that's how people can walk over hot coals and not get burned, because the power of their command over what they believe creates their experience. So in birth, rather than contracting with the intensity of sensation that would occur in what people call contractions, I called rushes, because they were huge rushes of energy that would occur. So rather than contracting and resisting the force and moving away from it, I actually would expand into it and move my attention towards the center of intensity, because there's always an epicenter of intensity of sensation. And if you move towards where it's most intense, you can actually keep moving towards the center of it. And it's like moving towards an infinite center, which you never actually reach. You're always dancing it and meeting it fully with your presence. And in doing that, there's an alchemy that happens where it can actually start dissolving and can become anywhere on the scale between neutral to pleasurable, because it is such intense sensation. If you could fully release into it, for me it was the most intense pleasure I've ever felt in my life. And it actually really initiated me to a whole new level in my nervous system, where since the birth I experienced more ecstasy and pleasure in the most simple mundane activities than I've ever experienced in my life, because it did upgrade me to a whole nother level. So yes, I sustained and I experienced a sustained kind of ecstatic state for about 10 hours. My labor was 12 hours. And really in the second half, there was more very distinct rolling orgasms that occurred that were very overwhelming. But it was really a sustained state of ecstasy that I was carried through the whole experience.
It's a boy. It's a boy.
Again, coming back to the, our expectation paired with belief creates our experience. It truly does, whether we believe that or not. And we do have an ability to, create something new if we can actually open our mind to the possibility of something different. And when we can view a model of somebody actually experiencing that, it actually can change the wiring in our brain to create a whole new pathway that we can then traverse if we choose to open up to it. And, I'd also say that to be very careful about, for a woman to not expect that she's going to have an orgasmic birth or even try to achieve that, because it actually, it's counter to the experience of having an orgasm. I mean, if you're trying to have an orgasm, you're grasping and it pushes it away. So it's really through the total dissolution of expectation into total surrender into the moment of pure presence to really allow what's occurring to happen with as much relaxation as possible that makes it possible. And orgasm can look very different for every woman. A woman can be completely still with no movement, her eyes closed, and to the outside looks like nothing's occurring, and she can be having a very profound otherworldly experience that can be termed orgasmic. And I actually really prefer to use the term ecstatic, because orgasm has so much stigma attached to it in our society about the sexuality, and there's a lot of repression occurring. So I just prefer to leave that word out for the most part, and because ecstasy is more neutral. The ecstatic states can be achieved through many different realms, through dancing, through enjoying a piece of beautiful fruit. I mean, it's through attunement with the moment and fully surrendering to the moment that state can be achieved. So, it's not like my birth was a walk in the park. It wasn't like I'm running through a field of flowers. It was intense. And it took a lot of focus to remain in that ecstatic state. It took my attention remaining towards that center and not letting myself get lazy, because I actually had a few moments where I let my attention wane for a minute. I got tired near the end. I was getting exhausted. And my attention started to kind of check out. And in that moment, the flood of intensity suddenly could have felt like pain. And yet I redirected instantly back towards that center, and it again dissipated. So it takes intense, intense focus. And so, you know, if a woman has prepared herself to be able to be relaxed in the face of intensity, then anything is really possible. And
So, Elena, that's you do a couple of things. You work with women who are in the stages that Amber was in, right? And preparing for the conscious birth. And then you also work with individuals who, we've all been born, and who perhaps had a traumatic birth experience. And then you do work with that to release that as well.
Well, in the workshop, it's a chain of experiences / exercises / techniques. It's specific movement, specific breathing, specific movement again of different parts of the body, specific breathing differently from the previous one. It all coming together. It's all designed to create a slightly altered state of being in which we can access our God's given free will, in which we can go into the very beginning of our making and hit different options, you know.
but really the effect for me of the power of the effect of the workshop for me when I was 3 months pregnant was that, you know, I lost my mother when I was 7. So I don't actually know what my birth was like, and there's no stories around it. You know, I know there's an imprint there, and I know that it wasn't exactly peaceful and she wasn't having a good time. That's all that I know. And the effect for me was that it gave me the opportunity to actually clear the limbic imprint that was in place that I came into on this planet, and actually clear it so that I had the opportunity to create anew without that dictating what my experience would be. So through the exercises, which were definitely a rewiring for the nervous system, there was one exercise that gave me the opportunity to actually rewrite my birth. And for me, I fully believed that that was possible. So that was true for me. I actually did rewrite my birth into my ideal birth, which created a pathway for infinite possibilities from that point on.
Want to mention our little ritual of
Oh, yes,
adopting each other?
and we did separate than the workshop. We recognized our connection of the mother-daughter connection. We were in Hawaii, and we were there with several others of our friends, and we were in the water in this tidal pool, and they made a tunnel in front of her between their legs, and I got behind her and she spread her legs open, and I actually swam. This wave came and I swam through her legs and through the birth canal back into the world, and was really reborn in that moment of my choosing, with really appreciating and receiving the mother in my life and the nurturing mother, which had been so much missing.
Was how might you know that you had a traumatic birth experience and need to heal that process?
Well, the surest way to know is just look at your life. Are you living to your full potential? If there is something that is holding you back, it is a good reason to look at primal time in life to see. Basically, what I understand, that when anything that happens more than twice, some kind of pattern in the experience of attracting the same kind of crappy job, or not a perfect situation with a spouse or a house or whatever, that if your dog bites you all the time, it's like there is all kinds of signs that we can look at and see the pattern. And if there is a pattern and something that is holding me back, something that does not allow me to feel completely fully engaged in living my life to my fullest potential, it's a good sign that there is something happened, some kind of sensory overload, pain, abandonment, my needs were not met the way they needed to be met. So that's basically the symptoms of less than ecstatic birth.
And so for people who participate in a workshop like the one you offer, what are some of the results, and what are some of the stories, in addition to Amber's, about how it's impacted their lives and enhanced their quality of life?
I have a website that has dozens of testimonies, and even a video clip of people participating in my workshops. It's birthintobeing.com, and a sister site, birthasweknowit.com, where people can go and just watch what it actually looks like to give birth in ecstasy and integrity. And people say that even from one workshop, it was a turning point. Their life is never the same. They just full of joy and energy and feel renewed, because we go into the very beginning, to the point where the soul took a vow to incarnate, and we go into a new experience of being conceived in love, being gestated in respect to this process, and being born the way a person actually wants to be born at this time in their life. And it does, and then I have stories, people say, I had this feeling of the milk pouring down my throat from my mother's nipple for like weeks after the workshop, because it's done in slightly altered state, and they actually have physical sensations of being born and looking into the mother's eyes and being lovingly held and nursed and just being welcomed, being gently, lovingly received and welcomed and seen, respected, appreciated. How many babies have that precious experience? And the thing is, babies are very, very sensitive. And this obvious thing that I'm saying right now is a great news for the most of the world, because babies were treated as completely insensing, unconscious pieces of flesh. Even open heart surgeries were done on babies with just paralyzing agent to keep them still and quiet, but no anesthetics, because it used to be believed that anesthetics are not good for babies. Well, guess what? Slicing them open without painkillers is not good for babies either. They are not numb. In fact, they're in some study I read that they're about 150 times more sensitive than we are, because all their nerve endings are still, brand new, not dulled and by the harsh environment. They're extremely, extremely open and sensing everything, even bright light or other people's sorrow. They're sensitive to the energy that walks into the room. If there comes in an adult full of stress and anxiety, the baby can feel and start crying, because it's like something really big and scary is approaching. And what do? We communicate, stay away from me.
On the bigger picture, how does the work that you're doing impact and enhance our planet, with all the craziness that's going on right now?
Well, I hope that it's affecting it in very real, very big way, because I am doing these workshops for so long now. I had thousands of people in them, and they write to me great letters of gratitude, how beautiful their birth was, how it changed their lives when the father was able to receive his baby into his hands and just bond in a way that, in a very real way, when there's real bonding happens, when it's not on a week later then the father sees the child or doesn't know how to pick the baby up and how to do, which end the elimination is going to come out. There is this moment when a lot of fathers are so unprepared and so are not in touch with the whole concept of having a child, and that's very difficult for a baby, not to have that father's father's side of the family. So I have lots of parents writing to me about opening up to a very cosmic meaning of bringing a new child, bringing a new human being, that it's not just their baby, it's they become aware of being some sort of a portal, you know, some kind of co-creative process of bringing in, creating a whole new person. You know, it's something to be said about it. It's not creating just another, you know, poem, which is also a beautiful act of creation, but it's creating a whole new human being that did not exist before. It really, really is a miracle. And parents really need to understand and be completely, fully present for that miracle.
How would both of you describe natural childbirth? What does that mean nowadays?
First, wow, how would I describe natural childbirth? Well, for me, just what comes to mind is the allowance for a woman to be able to listen to the guidance, to be able to move her on the path of birth, because all the information is intact and there if a woman is willing and able to surrender into it. So to me, that's what natural childbirth. Now, that can occur really in any setting. It's more likely to occur in a setting where the woman feels completely at ease and comfortable in a home environment, or in a natural birthing, like a natural birthing center where they have different resources available to them, like water to get into when they feel that, or balls to utilize. You know, it's definitely, as Elena had mentioned earlier, it's going to be far more difficult in a hospital setting with bright lights, hooked up to IVs, with people who are insensitive to the woman's needs surrounding her. That's going to be unlikely. It's not impossible, just unlikely. So really creating an environment that fosters a woman feeling natural and relaxed, whatever that may mean for her.
I would say that natural birth is sort of, I am moving towards the term conscious birth. It seems like that's the more important emphasis. Even if it's conscious C-section, when the need comes and the woman needs to have medical intervention just to save her life and her baby's life, she still can have a conscious birth. When she would negotiate with doctors that they would dim the lights, which is a possibility even in C-section surgery, when there would be no extra noises, when the whole environment would be tended to consciously, when there would be no extra people, no medical students, like 20 of them coming in and sticking their arm up to their elbow in her vagina. It's people that she doesn't know. Of course they have to learn somehow, but it really interferes with the birth process when a nurse comes in without asking a woman, without warning her, and sticks a needle inside her, and the consciousness in the whole process. When she eats well throughout pregnancy, when she doesn't watch horror movies, and when she takes good care of herself emotionally, when she picks her battles, when she clears the air with her mother, with her father, with her father of the baby parents, when she is very clear about who is going to be present. If there's girlfriends, sisters, they need to be free from their own anxiety about their own birth. That's what my take. You know, it's not just about not being not being drugged, not being cut open. It's a whole different approach when, yes, no drugs, no surgeries is, of course, it is a natural birth. That's the number one definition, when it happens naturally, without anybody coming and interfering with the process. But as I said, there is this whole other layer when it's not just the birth itself, again, as I said, taken out of the context of the whole big picture. It's the conscious approach for understanding the connection with the baby throughout pregnancy and even during conception and during few months before the conception.
So I hear the conscious birth, and then there's also the surrender part
Right.
as well. You mentioned something, Amber, earlier on about surrendering and how that applies to all of us, men as well, but how we can incorporate that into our lives and how your experience of surrendering surpassed that, and you're now incorporating that into other parts of your life. Can you tell us a little bit about
Well, it
that?
was already incorporated before the birth in my life, and yet, as I said earlier, the birth initiated me to a whole nother level of my own inner knowing and trust in myself and my ability to really access what's available. So it's incorporated to a whole nother level now and continues to open up new petals, unfurl constantly in my life. But it's really the fundamental ways that we can really relate with what is if we are willing to actually really meet the moment, no matter what's occurring for us. I mean, it might be something that's coming our direction that we really would prefer not to interact with, yet if we can remain as present as possible to it, then it actually allows something new to be formed from that moment. So it's like when we really meet the moment and surrender to what is and remain connected to ourselves through navigating whatever that may be, then there's just new possibilities that open up for us in the way that we can live our life and experience life. Because when we're able to do that on a consistent basis, we start to notice that the circumstances around us actually change to adjust for how we're relating with them. So when we're living our life in a very surrendered and present way, then it's interesting to notice how more grace occurs more easily. Because when we're resisting what is, we actually will draw more of what we're resisting towards us. So it's a fundamental shift, a very distinct shift between resistance and surrender. And it's very subtle, and it's occurring in every moment all the time. And I notice in myself, even with that awareness, I'm always having to navigate and sometimes I'll flip-flop back and forth. And yet I never go too far off of that center point because I've gotten that center point reference very strong after all of these years. So for me, that's a huge one, and I'm so thankful that I'm finally in that place, because I feel honestly now that anything can come my way, and I can be there for it. Like, I can really meet anything in my life, no matter what it is, no matter how extreme it is, that I can sit there and I can really be there with it, and allow what's beneath it to emerge.
Tell me a little bit about, I want to go to a different topic. Let's talk about water births.
I was involved in conscious birth movement in Russia since 1982, and I was one of the people organizing those birth camps at the Black Sea, and so many babies were born there. I don't know how many. Well, we never did a head count, and when you're at the camp all summer for 4 months, and people are coming and going and coming and going, and they're camping in the nearing lagoons too, and not just in that one lagoon. So it was really hard years later to try to figure out how many people exactly.
Pregnant women taking and camping out there.
Yeah, lots. So together with one other organizer, Tatiana Sargunas, we were once sitting on the phone for hours trying to calculate, and we gave up on that. We never were able. It's in the hundreds. That's the closest we could come up with how many babies were born in the open water at the Black Sea, with wild dolphins being very, very close. It was in very shallow lagoons, so dolphins could not come any closer. They have to stay where they can swim. But their songs, their sounds, their playful jumps and interaction for hours at a time. It was there, even given that there were wild dolphins that never had contact with people before, only with Soviet fisheries, those, big, scary ships. And we were the first human contact that was treating them with respect and doing our best to communicate in the meditation and connect with them and invite them and just sit there on the rocks for hours to let them know that we're not there to hurt them.
And you were working with the doctor?
I was working with Igor Cherkovsky, the man who came up with concept of water birth in the early 60s. He was not a doctor. He is an honorary doctor now, but he never had any formal medical training. He was a swimming instructor. And he is one of dolphins, but has a human body. You know, when I watched him swimming, he was swimming at the speed of dolphins when they were hunting. Without any fins, without any gadgets, he was just right there with them, and it's like, whoa, that is not anatomically possible what he was doing.
So he had this idea for, I mean, how did he get to this idea of babies being born in the open
Well,
sea in the lagoon?
I also have the whole story in writing on my website, birthintobeing.com, in articles. It's a long story, but to make a long story short, he had a premature daughter born that was given to him to take home to die. And being a water merman, when he brought her home, he placed her in the water. And she was kept in the water for 24 hours and nursed in the water. Her mom was going in the bathtub with her. And she lived in the water for a few months. And by the time it was time for her to be born, not only she was alive, she was actually exceeding in all the parameters that they were measuring at the time. So for a few years he was pondering what would happen if the child actually would be born in water, like whales and dolphins do. He was always fascinated by whales and dolphins, holding them as far more intelligent than we are, considering that they're not getting a gravity concussion when they're getting born out of the water in the open. And he was saying, well, look at the egg yolk. If you break an egg and it falls on a pan, it goes flat. If it falls in a glass of water, it stays round. So the baby's soft brain doesn't get smooshed in his understanding of this process by the earthly gravity. You know, we are dealing with this pressure without even noticing it, because we don't have a reference point, what it would be like not having it. But babies do not have it. You know, they're in the weightless environment, and then when they come out into the dry world, there it goes. So he was placing a lot of emphasis that most of our brain is not available to us because of that. That's his theory. And he was saying that dolphins and whales are extremely evolved because they never lose any of their capacities due to the gravity.
Has there been any follow-up with the hundreds of babies that were born in the Black Sea?
No, unfortunately. There is no resources, there is no time, energy, money in it. I know all of them. They're children of my friends. When I go to Russia, I see them. They're amazing people. But then again, they had to deal with Soviet reality.
Yeah.
They had to deal with... Don't get me started on what they have to deal with, going into, you know, Soviet schools and dealing with the whole political, economical structure of insanity. Plus, life is just very difficult in the mother-father dynamic in Russia. It's
It would be hard to gauge then.
yeah. So where do you draw the line? You know, they have the built-in design to handle all of that, but how they handle it varies to different degrees. And still, when I look at them, I see what we're supposed to be like as a species, you know, when we're not harmed from the start.
Elena, how did conscious birth into being, how did that become your passion in this lifetime for you?
Well, I met with Igor Cherkovsky in '82, and it was a 4-hour download. In 4 hours, he told me everything he knows about connection between formative period and how we live. In '82, he had it completely down without reading anything. He he's not a mental person. He doesn't really have time or room in his head for books. He is this crazy healer, a really large presence, but very, very intense and not very socially fitting kind of personality, Rasputin type, very, very powerful. So what he was telling me was not read. It was his understanding of the way life works, and on top of it, nothing was written about it in Russian at that time. There was this iron curtain at that time, and we didn't even have the concept of prenatal psychology, of that there is already some things in writing in America, that there was already Dr. David Chamberlain's books out at that time, but not in Russia. It was all unheard of. So in 4 hours, he completely gave me a transmission of the impact the birth has on the way we live. And I was sitting there stricken with the whole understanding, oh my God, all these games that we're doing, it's just, to fix the problems, to make us more comfortable with that quality of living, to deal with complications that we cause because we're just not born well. If we are born well, we don't create that level of chaos. We don't have that level of aggression and fear-based mentality. Babies that are born well are kind. They're compassionate. They are absolutely don't have a need to inflict pain on their friends, on their neighbors, on themselves. They don't have self-destructive patterns in their behaviors. They don't come here for pain. They come here to play, to enjoy being in the body. There is no accident that every cell on our skin has a pleasure receptacle. We're wired for good life.
Remember, we're going to have to wrap it up shortly, but how would you describe your water birth? Do you have one child?
I have one child, yes. Well, my labor was a total of 12 hours, and for the first 6 hours, I was actually in my home. It started at about 12:30, just after midnight, and I was completely quiet. My husband gave me all the space that I needed, and I basically did, as Elena was describing earlier, like the deer, went into complete stillness and silence, tuned into the inside and just started listening and just allowing the current to move through. And I was really in between the position of on all fours and allowing the spiral to move through my body, through my whole body, my head all the way through my pelvis during the rushes. And then in between the rushes I would lay down in a yoga pose. It's called child's pose, where you just simply, you sit on your heels and with your knees in front of you, and you lean your head forward and put your head on the ground. So I was really drawing in all the energy, all the strength, and then moving it through. And then exactly the halfway mark was when I was ready to go into the tub. And so it was already filled for me, and we had created a space outside under a beautiful monkey paw tree with a large bathtub. And so I went out at that point, and I remained in the tub for the next 6 hours. There was no part of me that wanted to get out. And in fact, at different times I was asked by my midwife, would you like to get out and walk around? And it was very clear that I was to remain right there. So I really felt that the water, first of all, kept that feeling of ease and flow happening through me. It was very natural and easy to feel very relaxed and held by the water, to not have the force of gravity that I was having to resist, and I was cushioned, in this anti-gravity little sack. And in the end, when Oris, my son Oris, finally came out, it was really, really a special moment when he entered into the water. He slid right out, and my partner caught him in his hands, and in this beautiful moment of exclamation, we didn't know whether it was a boy or a girl, and we also didn't choose a name for him. We were going to listen and allow his name to come. And in this moment, this spontaneous moment, he caught him and said, "Oris, my son," and it just emerged, and it was so beautiful, and we really allowed him to actually stay under the water until he was ready to come up. So we just watched, and it was very quick for him. It was actually maybe a minute maximum, and he stayed there still and really started to kind of unfurl his limbs, and then it looked like he wanted to take a breath. Like it was a very clear motion. So he lifted him out in that moment and onto my chest, and then he started to breathe from there. And it was so, to me, just the idea. I didn't actually research, all of these facts about water birth and why it was so beneficial. It just, to me, felt like the right decision, and it's not for every woman as well. But really, for me, that's the part that seemed the most fitting was that the child grows for 9 months in a sack of water. And it seems like the most natural, easeful transition for the child to go from a smaller body of water into a larger body of water, to expand into that before actually entering our atmosphere, and then, which is a whole new set of senses that are suddenly activated. So to me, it just seemed like, again, I was going for the most gentle, natural way of this child emerging in this world that could possibly be. So there was other aspects to that as well.
And you filmed your experience.
We did.
And now it's been broadcast all over the world. So why? And that's very vulnerable to do that. So what are you hoping will be the impacts of sharing your story and having it televised?
Well, I'd first say that, we had filmed the birth not ever intending to share it with anybody. It was really just for us to have in our archives to review and show our son later. And when, at 2 months, my son was 2 months, and Elena and I were having a very casual conversation about my birth experience, and she said, "Hey, I happen to have a camera in the car. Do you mind if I film you?" And I said, "Sure." So from that is when she asked if I could then she could use my footage in her movie, and I had a moment where, of pause and moment of resistance of like, wow, that is the most intimate moment of my life. Like, how do I feel about sharing that with the whole world? And after tuning in, I received that, if one woman witnessed me giving birth in this way and it actually inspired her to give birth in a way that was more gentle and a way of lovingly receiving this being into the world, then it's all worth it. Then that's okay. I'm willing to put myself out there, and fortunately the ripple has been much larger than that. So at this point, I'm just ultimately honored that I get to be in this position of sharing a new story of possibility, of being a model for what's possible, and not to create an expectation for those that feel that it's beyond their means, but just for those that are ready to birth in this way. Look, it's possible, and for that, I'm really honored to be able to share that, and any other opportunity that may be.
Why is it so important for everyday women to hear stories like this, and especially those who maybe aren't going to have children or have already had their children?
Well, it really, picture is worth 1,000 words. You saw the birth into being, right? Mm-hmm. Before you had your own birth. And Tatiana Sarguna is the woman in the birth into being that went into this experience quite consciously, because we only had 5 births videotaped, because all the other women did not want to share with the world. They just wanted to have it on film for their own archive. And Tatiana said, no, we need to find a few examples that we can really go for it and share with the world so women can see, because unless they see it, most of the women don't understand why place a laboring woman into the water. And when you see how beautiful it is, they just all of a sudden get it. Yes, oh, of course, this looks so right. And Amber's birth is my favorite among all the births that I have. And actually on the website, Birth as We Know It, there is a trailer that shows this incredible, powerful transmission. It's not just the birth, it's the transmission of the new birthing paradigm that happened. And I have numerous stories when women are writing to me and saying, I had an elective C-section scheduled a week before I saw the film, and I saw it and I canceled the surgery, and we had the beautiful water birth. My husband delivered the baby just like in the movie, just like Amber, and they did not know that it's possible until they saw it. And without even reading much, because when a woman in 3rd trimester, there's not really much reading. It's not a mental thing to to give birth. But when they see the image, just few minutes of watching it, all of a sudden it's like they snap off that mass hypnosis that they were under, that they cannot do it. And it is truly, that's all there is. It's some kind of form of mass hypnosis that women are incapable of procreating. And now I'm watching all over the world that women are so ready, so ripe and ready to wake up, because the film, without any marketing, any advertising whatsoever, I did not have any resources to promote it. It's in 56 countries. In 3 years of its existence, it just went like wildfire. It's translated into 12 languages by volunteers. People in other countries just, oops, I translated it. Is it okay? Yes, it is okay. So it's available now in many languages, and it's just making a big difference out there in the world, and I'm so happy and so proud. And Amber's birth is a highlight of the whole film.
For both of you, what would your message be to women around the world?
Well, my message to women around the world is we can do it. And even more so, we are the ones who can. We are the ones we've been waiting for. It's not up to our government to give us permission to be powerful. It's not up to our doctors to empower us and give us permission to claim our birthright. It's not up to anybody else. It's up to each woman to wake up and live her life. It's really that basic, that intimate. It's up to each woman to take her life into her own hands and live it to her full potential, fully engaged in her own life, in the life of her children, in creating those children.
And really trust yourself and be willing to actually investigate the veneers that we've accumulated in this life that keep us from accessing our most intrinsic nature, which is naturally ecstatic. And, if one can actually really explore what's holding us back and be willing to look it straight in the face and move to the other side, we can be living an entirely new life that is really aligned with what we really want to be creating.